Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
I think what we're going to do today, let me just tell you the terrain ahead. We'll talk about Ga'al Yisrael, the wording of the final Bracha, which is what Alan wanted to bring up at the end last time. And I said, no, too much. Let's leave it for next time. I think we'll do what Joanna wanted to do, which is we'll look at the evening version of the Bracha. Marizon, you're waving. Oh, she's leaving. Okay, I don't know if she was flagging me down. She was saying goodbye. And then we'll try to put it all together. The whole Shacharit service, which means the three blessings of the Shema as an envelope around the three paragraphs of the Shema, and talk about the whole flow of all that. I don't think we'll finish that latter part today. I think that will carry into next week, okay? And then after that, I guess we'll move on to the Amida, unless someone says we need to have some other, little palate cleanser in between the Shema and the Amida, and we think of something else to do for a week or two. But that would be the plan. All right. So to the task at hand. So again, just quick review. This third bracha of the Shema, the blessing between the Shema itself and the Amidah, talks about God as Redeemer in fancy theological language, which means God as Savior and Protector in history. The evidence of that is the Exodus from Egypt. Last week I said literal belief in the Exodus as an example of a miracle of God intervening in history might be something that would be challenging for modern people to believe. Larry told me afterwards he thought that I was radical. I didn't think it was that radical to say that modern people, contemporary people, might have trouble believing in literal, concrete miracles in human history. But maybe I was unknowingly radical. And this is an important question, how we find God's traces in history and how you understand that theological principle has to do with your understanding of God. If you have a Maimonidean view of God, that Hashem is all-powerful, outside of the universe, not dependent on anything, and has ultimate power, then you might have one view of what it means for God to make miracles. And if you have a more Kabbalistic, panentheistic view of God is the fabric of the universe, ein od milavado, as we say in the Aleinu. There is nothing in the universe that isn't actually a part of God, which is how mystics understand ein od milavado. Then you might have a different view of what it means when we say God makes miracles in the universe. So this is not a class in theology. So I just want to let the question hang there. We all have to work out for ourselves as people of faith what we mean when we talk about God, what our understanding of God is. I'll just sort of shorthand to avoid all theological debates by saying that the first bracha of the Shema says, we find evidence of God's presence in the world in creation. Second bracha, we find evidence of God's presence in the world through relationship and revelation, Torah. And the third bracha, we find we find evidence of God's presence in the world through human history. How we see God's traces there and what we mean by that theologically, I think we could discuss, but I think we're not, because it will just take too long, and people have very personal, subjective ideas about who God is and how God is present in the world. So, and if you want to talk about that more, then you should insist that, Rabbi Klickfelder, Rabbi Rembaum has a theology class to talk about theologies of God. By the way, does anyone attend the Siddur class with Rabbi Chorny? Anyone here? Wave your hand if you do. No one does. Oh, well, I was going to say, what is it that she does that's different than this class? Since we now have two Siddur classes in our synagogue. So, but if no one attends, I guess that means we have no overlap between the two groups. So we don't know the answer to the question.
I think she does nighttime.
You think she does nighttime?
Yeah, I did a couple of times.
Okay, got it. Well, we're going to do nighttime today. So first of all, let's start with Ga'al Yisrael. So what is surprising for those who know some Hebrew? What is surprising in terms of the grammatical tense of the verb of Baruch Atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael? What does it mean, Alan?
Literally. Well, it means it's in the past tense.
Right.
God who redeemed
so it means
Israel.
Blessed are you, God, or we acknowledge you, God, who redeemed Israel. So why is this a little surprising? It's surprising when we consider the other two brachot of the Shema. So we said, Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot, even though we would say God created the lights at the beginning of time in Genesis chapter 1, theologically we're saying God continues to be creator. So we refer to God in the present tense as Yotzer HaMeorot, the creator of the lights, not who created the lights. In the second bracha, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem HaBocher B'Amo Yisrael B'Ava, also present tense, who chooses B'nai Yisrael, even though we could say God, technically in terms of the Torah story, God chose B'nai Israel back then. We could say when God chose Abraham, or God spoke to Moses, or took us out of Egypt, or whatever moment you pick as the moment of choosing. Still, we phrase the bracha in the present or ongoing tense, God who chooses Israel lovingly. Okay? So God is creating in present tense. God is choosing in present tense. But we say God who redeemed in past tense. So which one of these doesn't belong? It seems like the third bracha is kind of the odd man out. So the question is, why is it phrased in the past? Now you can say, well, because it talks about the Exodus from Egypt, which happened then, to which my response would be, okay, but the first bracha talks about the creation of the sun, moon, and the stars, which happened then. Or the second bracha talks about the giving of the Torah, which happened then. So obviously the author of the first and second bracha knew that these were events that happened then, but wanted to make a theological statement that that action of God in the world, creation or revelation, is ongoing, put it in the present tense. Why isn't the third bracha Goel Yisrael, which is what we would expect? I'll pause. Thoughts about that. Michael, then Joanna. Then maybe Alan had a question maybe Alan had an answer since he raised the question. Michael, Joanna, Alan, in that order.
Yeah, I wanted to dispute the first one about creation of the lights. I can imagine the ancient mind looking at the sky every day and believing that it was a recreation each time. It went from a light sky to dark, and suddenly stars were created, or the morning and suddenly the sun is created again. And so that's one way to explain why it would be in the present tense, at least with regard to that first paragraph.
Got it. I'll agree with you, Michael, and disagree with you. I'll agree with you in saying that when these brachot were written, let's just say loosely speaking, in the Mishnaic Talmudic era, give or take, sometime between the years 0 and 700, the Israelites already had the Torah, right? The Jews had the Torah. They knew what the story was about when creation was. Creation was back then, and they didn't believe, by the way, that the sun was recreated every day. They believed that the sun went away somewhere off stage and then it came back on stage. That's my disagreement with you. My agreement with you is, in a less concrete, more abstract way, the bracha actually says what you said it says, which it says, HaMechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid va'aseh v'reshit. God, in God's goodness, reenacts creation every single day, right? So the doctrine is creation is ongoing. But if creation is ongoing, the question still stands. If creation is ongoing, revelation is ongoing, how come redemption isn't ongoing, right? Or how come the bracha doesn't phrase it in the ongoing tense? Joanna?
So I have several Siddurim in front of me, and I'm looking at the translation of Ga'al Yisrael.
Yeah.
And so Birnbaum translates it in the past tense, who redeemed Israel.
Right.
And Sim Shalom and Lev Shalem, but change it into the noun, redeemer of Israel.
Pardon me. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
And my understanding is it is, in fact, the present tense that is more conducive to being translated as a noun also, right? Like, so if it had been Goel Yisrael, that would fit much better with a possible noun translation instead of a verb.
Correct. Redeemer of Israel would back translate into Goel Yisrael. Correct. They are fudging. I believe that would be the technical term.
But then what about the construction habocher?
It means the one who chooses. The one who chooses. Right. So it could mean the one who chooses. Sorry. So just like this would be awkward English, but if I could show you in English how it could be, how the verb could also be understood to be a non-verb. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So Yotzer HaMeorot could mean who creates the lights as a verb. It could also mean who is the creator of lights, right? Because it means the creating one. So it could mean creating. It means who creates, present tense in English, or who is the one who is creating lights, meaning in English we would say creator of lights. Habocher b'Am Yisrael be'ava means who chooses Israel lovingly, or it could also mean the chooser of Israel. So Goel Yisrael could mean who redeems Israel, or who is the redeemer of Israel. Except the Hebrew is not Goel Yisrael, it's Gal Yisrael.
So just back to that present tense thing. So I'm just looking at the second blessing. It's habocher.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Why not? Is that is there some reason why it's habocher and not bocher?
Bocher? No, I don't know.
They're kind of. Are you saying they're kind of equivalent?
I would think they would be pretty equivalent.
So the one who
is
such and such.
It's either chooser of Israel or the chooser of Israel.
Okay.
I don't think it makes a huge difference.
Joanna, it's an
interesting. Did you have an answer, Joanna? Were you going to?
I don't have an answer, but
float an answer. Okay.
I don't have an answer, but it's interesting in light of this discussion to look at Birkot HaShachar, because some of those verbs after the opening, after you get past Eloheinu Melech Haolam, sometimes we have like Hanoten Laya'ef Koach.
Yeah.
But then we have Zokef Kefufim. So some of them have the hey and some don't.
But they're present. They're still present.
They're all present, but it's just interesting that some have the hey and don't.
Yep. Okay. Alan, then Meyer. Alan.
Okay. I share the view that the first two paragraphs can indeed be present tense because creation, as you said, is ongoing.
Yeah.
And revelation, it says that, we were all at Sinai and we experience revelation each and every day. Mm-hmm. And here, I think, we have, it's interesting that in the Amidah, the Bracha is in the present tense, Goel Yisrael, and that may be a part of it that they're saying who redeems, so it's keeping the thought. But here, I think the only thing that I can try and make sense out of this is that it's referring to the paragraph that precedes this bracha, the Ezrat Avotenu, talking about everything in the past tense about what God did for us in redeeming us from Egypt, all the powers about what you did, killing the firstborn and splitting the waters and everything else.
Yeah.
And because it makes specific reference to what was happening in Mitzrayim, it would be appropriate to say Ga'al Yisrael rather than Goel.
Right. Yes, but there's more by way of tense implied in the bracha as a whole, because there's also a prayer for the future, right? And theoretically, by the way, what's in between the past and the future is the present. So maybe there is an implication here. We said, God, you did all, remember, we talked about the flow of ideas in the paragraph. God, you did all this stuff, okay? And we need revelation in the future. and this may be implying, not revelation, we need redemption in the future. This may be implying that we don't have redemption in the present. Do we have God as creator in the present? Yes, the sun came up this morning. Do we have God as revealer of Torah in the present? Yes, I have many tabs of many versions of the Torah on my computer, right? So the revelation, so the sun is here, the Torah is here. Is the redemption here? Not quite.
We want Mashiach now.
We want Mashiach now. We're in between. Okay, Meyer, what's your thought?
I just wanted to put the phrase back in context and wonder if it's something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So we go from Hashem Niloch L'Olam Va'ed, right? They were talking about something that's eternal.
Yeah.
Then we go Sur Yisrael Kuma Bezrat Yisrael. So this is something present, right?
Yeah.
Sur Yisrael Kuma arise. It's now. Yeah. And then Yisrael. This is deliver. This is something present but in the future. Yeah. Looking at something that you can deliver Yehuda and Yisrael. Yeah. And then going to the past, Goal Yisrael. So we have the present, future, and past.
Yeah.
All contained right after we talked about eternal God.
Got it.
So that redemption is both past, present, and future.
Got it. Good. I just want to argue with that slightly and just say, okay, doesn't it leave us a little flat at the end? We're ending with, you did this in the past. Is that really what the Siddur is about? Given that we have Yotzer Hamil wrote and Habocher B'Mo Yisrael Be'ava, that might leave me a little bit flat. God, you were the Redeemer, Meyer.
But we're about to enter into the Amidah, right? Yep. So this is really kind of standing at the gates of the way I was taught this is that you're almost walking into the king's chamber and you're outside. And that's why we have the Hashem Hasvad Tutach, right? You're sort of going out back and in to recognize you're in a holy space you're about to enter into.
Yeah.
So as you go into the chamber of an entity like that, you acknowledge sort of the past is really kind of what it creates the aura of honor, essentially, more than the future. And we're about to do the order of praise, thanks, supplication.
Yeah.
And this is sort of leading up, I think, to that. So it's not, I don't think this is looking backwards. I think this is looking forwards.
Got it.
As we're about to sort of step into this other chamber.
Okay. Got it. Good.
Can I just ask something about the tenses of those verbs?
Ilana can ask, and then Marshall. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael and Ufteh Chenumecha, aren't these I want to say imperatives, but are they
correct.
sort of
they are,
serious?
No, they're imperatives.
They're not futures, they're requests, aren't they?
Yes, they are imperatives. Grammatically, they're imperatives. Command. Get up.
They're requests.
Yes, that's a polite way of saying it. Yeah. They're saying new, right? Again, the flow of ideas. You did all this stuff in the past. New, appear, please. Now, we need you. By the way, just to comment on that briefly, I'm not going to turn pages to look at it, but that is also the flow of ideas in the Kedusha on Shabbat morning, both in Shacharit and in Musaf, right? We got all this mystical stuff about the God. We talked when we talked about the first bracha. We talked about all the mystical stuff about Kadosh, 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 and Baruch V'od Hashem Yimkomo, the visions of the mystics in late antiquity, which were adopted into the Siddur, visions of God who fills the whole earth. And then we say, Mimkomcha Malkeinu Tofia, which means new. All of that is very nice, God, but when are you actually going to appear and rebuild Jerusalem, right? Or in Musaf, Mimkomo hu yifen v'rachamim, right? From God's place, may God turn towards us in mercy, meaning, okay, we said all this mystical stuff, God fills the universe. Hey, we need you now. Okay, so that's the turn that is also taken. That same turn in the Ilana of the command form is the same turn that happens in the middle of Kedusha on Shabbat morning, both in Shacharit and Musaf. We're not going to flip pages to look at it. Marshall.
Reuven Hammer actually makes reference, and this is sort of saying that referencing like a prayer we now say for the state of Israel, Avinu Shabbat Shamayim Tzur Yisrael V'Go'alo.
Yeah.
He says that there was an ancient version of our present prayer, which begins with the phrase Tzur Yisrael. And he said that the Chatimah for what we're discussing now is in the present tense, concluding with the phrase Tzur Yisrael V'Go'alo, that God is referred to as the Rock of Israel and the Redeemer of Israel.
Right. So what you're saying is there's another version of this prayer from an ancient one, which I want to point out is not adopted as the mainstream one. Right.
Right.
Okay. By the way, just to come back to something Alan said about there's a bracha in the Amidah Goel Yisrael, there is also, I've seen in some of the sources, a very prosaic answer, which is the reason that it's Gal Yisrael and not Goel Yisrael is because there is a bracha in the Amidah Goel Yisrael, and we don't want people to get mixed up in the sense of, remember that throughout much of Jewish history, people davened by heart, if they knew how to daven at all. If they didn't, they just listened to the Chazan and said Amen, right? The Chazan may or may not have had a Siddur. And for anyone who davens at all, sometimes by heart, you may have experienced the phenomenon that sometimes the same line appears more than once in the Siddur, like Hashem Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed, for example, or Baruch Hashem Le'olam Amen V'Amen, that paragraph which is in Shacharit and also in Mariv, but after it is something different. And if you're davening by heart, sometimes you find yourself going off wrong. Did everyone follow what I mean? Meaning, have you ever found yourself saying, you're saying, and you're thinking, am I in the first paragraph of the Shema or the second paragraph of the Shema? I've lost the thread. Okay. So there's a prosaic answer, which is if we have two brachot with the same ending and you're davening by heart the way most people did throughout most of Jewish history prior to the ease of availability of printed Siddurim, you might actually lose the thread of your davening if there are two blessings with the same wording. You might say, Baruch Atah Hashem Goel Yisrael. You might say this, Sur Yisrael, Kuma Bet Yisrael, V'dechinu Machri Dav Yisrael, V'namar Goleinu, Baruch Atah Hashem Goel Yisrael, Refainu Hashem V'nerafeh, Hoshienu V'nivashea, Ki Tilatenu Ata. I might veer off track and all of a sudden be in the middle of the Amidah, because some of the time when you're davening, you go on autopilot, right? Like, am I in the second? There are times when I'm saying, when I'm in the second paragraph of the Shema, and then all of a sudden I'm starting V'hayayim Shamoa again, and I say to myself, I think I'm saying the second paragraph of the Shema again, but I'm not exactly sure. How many people have ever had that experience? Please raise your hand, right? Like, where am I? Right. Okay. So that could be another practical reason to not have two brachot that are actually fairly close to each other geographically in the service, that have the exact same wording that might lead you off track. So I've seen that answer in the sources also. A very practical, answer, not having to do with any of these sort of, idea kind of answers. Joanna?
Is there any thought that even if the text that precedes the bracha, the core of the bracha text is different, that if you have two brachot with the same chatima, you're in essence saying the same bracha back to each other. Would one be like a bracha levatela? Like would one cancel?
You're making it a sort of a halachic reasoning rather than a practicality reasoning based on the same thing. Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that they're saying it would be a bracha levatela. Bracha levatela means a wasted bracha. It means if I say hamotzi and say God's name, but I don't actually eat bread, right? It's called a bracha levatela. You're not supposed to say God's name with no purpose, right? And so I don't know if it would be that, but rather it didn't make sense to some editor, to say, oh, we're saying the bracha, the same wording, the same bracha in two different places, and each place actually has a different flow of ideas, which we'll see when we get to the Amidah, and that doesn't make sense. Something like that. Michael?
I have the most trouble in Pesukei de Zimra when we read the line, Adonai Hoshea HaMelech Yanenu V'Yom Koreno, and it's either followed by Hoshea Et Amecha or Ashrei.
There you go.
Later.
Correct. Okay. We have a small number of minutes, and what I'm going to do at that time is let's look at the evening version of this bracha, which in the Sim Shalom is in 204, and in the Slim, where are you? In the Slim, I'll get there.
We're after 137.
Thank you. In the Slim, it's on page 139. Now, this bracha will make Larry happier because Larry was the one who felt like our version was, like some Dr. Seuss animal that was put together by a committee with all kinds of parts stitched together. Whereas because Mariv is shorter, Mariv is intentionally shorter because people got to get home. It's getting dark and you have to leave synagogue and go across the fields and it's dangerous. So we want people to be able to get home at night. This is a much shorter, tighter version of the bracha. It starts with emet. It is true. Emet ve'emunah kol zot v'kayam aleinu. So we have some of those keywords, emet, emunah, kayam. It's true. It's established. He is God and no one else. We are his people. And then we launch right into hapodenu miad melachim, malkeinu hagoaleinu mikaf kol ha'aritzim. The one who redeems us from kings, our ruler who redeems us from the hand of all the haughty, who punishes our enemies, pays them back. He does amazing things. And here it's clear what the amazing things are. He keeps us alive. He doesn't let us stumble. He causes us to walk on our enemies and raises up our salvation. And we go right into, in the middle of the paragraph, Ha'osalanu nisim unikama bifaro. Okay? Pharaoh, Egyptians, taking us out of Egypt, the whole deal. All right? So essentially what we have in the corresponding evening bracha is a much tighter, shorter version of the theological idea, which I think only reinforces what we said at the beginning about what this bracha is actually about. It is about redemption in history. And we saw this, by the way, also for the first bracha, right? The first bracha, Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech, is really long in Shacharit with all kinds of pieces to it. It has El Baruch Gadol Deah, a little poem. It has the Kedusha, right? It has all these different elements, okay? Whereas the nighttime version is much shorter because Mariv's got to be shorter because people have to go home. And it sort of goes more directly right to the matter, the heart of the matter, so it feels less like it's put together by committee, et cetera, et cetera. But it's clear, and by the way, and the fact that it is shorter and tighter, I think makes it clearer what the paragraph is about in terms of its ideology. So when we say Kayam, God is Kayam, God exists, we're not just saying, oh, theologically there is a God in the world. What it means is, no, God actually really has force. Actually, God is the only thing that has ultimate force, right? God is the only ruler with ultimate force, which is why God can squash all those other people who say that they are kings. A lot of various rabbis whose Divrei Torah online I follow the last few weeks when they talk about the whole point of the Exodus story, which we're reading in the Torah, so it's very timely that we're talking about this as we're in the midst of these Torah readings. Talk about that, what's the point of the plagues, and is God an egomaniac, and why couldn't God have just gone poof and done the miracle of taking them out right away? Why all the draying around? And the answer that a lot of thinkers give, it's a very contemporary kind of framing of it, is because God wants to make abundantly clear that the rulers who think that they are the ultimate authority in the world, the pharaohs of the world, are not the ultimate authority of the world. No one is the ultimate authority other than God. And we have in the Haftarot that we read the last couple of weeks from Yechezkel, Ezekiel, we have Pharaoh of Egypt saying, I am the Nile, and I made it, right? The Pharaoh, I don't know how to pronounce this word, the adjective from Pharaoh. Pharaonic, I don't know how to say it, but the Pharaonic idea is, the Pharaonic ideology is, I, the human ruler, am ultimate, and I am a deity. And one way of looking at the whole story of the Exodus is God wants to provide the final rebuttal against that human claim that any human ruler could think that they are the final authority and they are the deity. And we know there are lots of rulers in ancient times who said that, right? You know, Babylonian emperor thought that also. There are Psalms where it says the king of the house of David is the son of God. Okay? And the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, is meant to be very, very clear. There's only one ultimate authority, and human authorities are always contingent, dependent, and fallible. Mr. Pharaoh, that's the message of Yetziat Mitzrayim to Pharaoh and the Egyptians, but also to the Israelites. Okay? So again, the liberal rabbis then say, so when you become a ruling power, don't you become Pharaoh? That's what they say in their sermons. Okay, the message to the Israelites is Pharaoh is wrong, and when you're a free people, don't try to emulate the pharaonic structure of the world or ideology. Okay, so it's the same idea here in Emet v'Yatziv or Emet ve'Emunah. The ultimate Kayam is, existor, is only God. The evidence of this is the Exodus. Okay, so the nighttime version of the bracha goes kind of zing right to the heart of matter, because we got to get you home so you can get across the fields and get into the village confines before it's totally dark out, because there are bad guys and wild animals out there. That's kind of why Mariv is short. Larry?
Quickly, just a couple of things. Jeremiah does the same thing this week in the Haftarah. Yeah. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. Meaning the Haftarah about mocking Pharaoh, because he says, I am the deal, man. I am the God. I created the Nile.
And they both refer to the Nile. They both refer to specifically the Nile, the creation, etc.
Right, because the Nile is the source of life in Egypt. So Pharaoh is saying, I am the creator of the source of life for all of us. Go on, Larry.
You're absolutely right that I much prefer the evening bracha, but I also think that it's. I would like for you to talk even next week about the absence of the Hashkivenu bracha, which follows in the evening, in the morning, because the Hashkivenu basically the Emet V'Emunah talks about the God of history.
Yeah.
And the Hashkivenu then is talking about the protector God more in the present.
Yeah.
So, right. And the final thing I want to say...
Well, I just want to say, though, the issue is the opposite. It's not the absence of the Hashkivenu in the morning. It's the addition of the Hashkivenu in the evening. Maybe that'll be our palate cleanser before we go on to the Amida.
That's good, because otherwise we have to wait until you get to Mariv.
Which I never do, because it's just Shacharit over and over, morning over and over, because it's a morning minyan. So maybe we'll do Hashkivenu. Go ahead, Larry.
I want to say one last thing. You keep talking about keeping the Mariv short. I agree completely, which is why we should not be saying Baruch Hashem li'olam amen v'amen at night, because it was never meant to be included. And I wish some rabbi would say, we're not going to do it, like in Israel.
Okay. So you know what we're going to do? I think in between Shmonet's blessings and the Amida, we'll talk about Hashkivenu and then the final blessing in the evening, since we don't do evening stuff. Next week, we are going to talk about putting it all together, the whole Shema service. Everyone have a good day. Be Torah. Stay safe and healthy. Bye.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.